Michael, you know, it's difficult because this day is about the victims, but in many ways it's about this defendant as well. There are things for this judge to consider. I would not want to be in her shoes right now. Whatever decision she makes, if she finds somewhere to think that this young man might be redeemable, she has to look all these people in their face and say that. And again, the emotion was just so devastating. I don't know how she does that. I would not want to be in that judge's shoes.
I literally was just going to say the following words. This is the type of case that reminds me why I never want to be a judge. If they were to put a gun in my head and tell me you have to be a judge, I would say no. I can't be a judge. I don't want to be a judge. This is a very difficult case, and I'll tell you why. This case is going to serve as many, many different things. It's going to serve as a litmus test on the CTE mitigating factor argument. Depending on what the judge does, the judge is going to set a precedent that every other criminal defense attorney going forward will have to discuss CTE at future conferences. You will have to have a clipboard when you're talking to your clients and ask them, hey, did you ever play football before? Have you ever been concussed? Have you been concussed in a car accident? Have you been concussed playing football? They would have to do it, right? Depending on how this judge comes down. I think the defense made a very compelling argument. I want to say to anybody who's looking at this case that you got to keep in mind, this is a difficult situation. However, this defendant pled guilty. This defendant tried to cut his own head off. That's not an excuse for what happened, nor is that to say that he should get off. But I think that this person should not be thrown away for 1,000,000 years. Tried to cut his own head off, pled guilty, and the father did it for me. Earlier on today, his father spoke in court, and he addressed Madison directly. He addressed her mother directly. He addressed the other person directly. I believed him. He was credible. The judge witnessed it. This person, I think, really helped his son in this set, because at the end of the day, this is a tragedy for multiple people. Yes, Madison's going to have to live with this for the rest of her life, which is why this person should go away for a few decades. But this is a very difficult decision for this judge.
Yeah, and it's incredible. Again, I agree with you, the decision this judge has to make. It was established by the defense that this is a young man who could be helped by medication, could be helped by treatment. So again, like you said, Mike, I don't know if you want to just throw this life away at this point, but we'll have to wait and see. Stand by, guys. We're going to take a break. Coming up next, we hear what the defendant, Spencer Pearson, has to say. All right, let's bring in trial attorney Michael Jaafar. Michael, I'll start with you. The defendant had the opportunity to speak. He took that opportunity. I want to know what you thought about his statement to the court.
I thought that they were just fine. I mean, I think it's just in line with what we thought. This young man's father hired these attorneys, sat with these attorneys. My assumption, did well with these attorneys and cried to these attorneys and said, I need you to save my son. I need you to guide me. He did something awful. I need you to guide me. And I think these attorneys sat down with this young man and said, your family's suffered. Everybody's suffering. You need to plead guilty. You need to basically, they all knew they were going to be here, Mike. They all knew that they were going to have this sentencing. They all knew that the witnesses were going to have the victim impact statement. They all knew they were going to be here, and they prepared him for it. He's prepared for it. I truly saw remorse in his voice. I saw remorse in his actions. Again, he tried to cut his own head off. He pled guilty to these crimes. I felt like him and his father convinced me that this is not a sentence that should be 1,000,000 to 2,000,000 years. I think that it should be less than that. I think he should walk free one day. Even the minimum here is 18 years, right? So I think his behavior and his allocution, I was satisfied with it.
Michael, I think part of, in terms of determining how you're going to look at all these elements, both, you know, the mitigating factors and aggravating factors, has to go with what and how the system and this particular judge looks at what this is all about, sentencing, right? Is it about retribution? Is it about punishment? Is it about making someone feel responsible for what they've done? I think that's part of it as well. What are your views on what sentencing is really or should be all about?
It's going to come down to the bias of this judge, and every one of us has a bias, right? My father would not sign the permission slip for me to continue playing football in high school back in 1993. He said it's going to make you go crazy, young man. My dad's a lawyer, right? So he thinks about these things. He had a bias. Then you talk to other people, and they say, I think that this whole thing is made up. I don't think there's such a thing as CTE. So it depends on the bias of this judge. I do believe that the fact that this defendant pled guilty and did not make everybody sit through a trial, the fact that there was the father just the father earlier broke my heart, and the way he spoke. By the way, these victims have a civil case going against the father, but the father still spoke to them and apologized to them, and he was sincere. I think if that doesn't sway this judge, that means that the judge just basically doesn't believe any of this stuff. He believes it's a bunch of gobbledygook and just thinks that this is just a bad seed, and this bad seed needs to go away for as long as possible. It really just depends on the bias of that judge. If I was a judge in this case, and thankfully I'm not, I would get closer to the 18 years.